Imagine standing in the middle of the scorching Nevada desert. It is 1957. You are just 19 years old, a fresh recruit, proud to serve your country. The officers told you this was a standard drill, a privilege. They told you to just cover your eyes with your hands. They said it would be safe, but they lied. When the bomb detonated, the light was so bright that through your tightly closed eyelids, you could see the bones of your own hands. You could see the blood vessels pulsing in your fingers. For a split second, you were a living X-ray. Welcome to the dark reality of Operation Plumbbob. The year the government used its own soldiers as lab rats. To understand why this tragedy happened, you have to understand the fear of the time. It was the height of the Cold War. America was terrified of the Soviet Union. The generals in the Pentagon didn't just want to know if a nuclear bomb could destroy a city. They wanted to know if men could walk through hell and keep fighting. They needed test subjects, not prisoners, not volunteers, but obedient young soldiers who wouldn't ask questions. They were brought to Camp Desert Rock in Nevada. It felt like a bizarre summer camp. Just 60 miles away in Las Vegas, tourists were drinking atomic cocktails and watching the mushroom clouds from hotel rooftops like it was fireworks. It was the atomic age. It was exciting. The soldiers in the trenches cracked jokes. They smoked cigarettes. They wrote letters to their sweethearts. They had no idea that the dust settling on their boots was already killing them. But the soldiers weren't the only living things in the desert that morning. A few hundred yards away, the scientists had set up a grotesque display. They built mock houses, parked tanks, and they brought in the animals. Pigs. Over 1,000 pigs. Why pigs? Because their skin burns just like human skin. Some pigs were dressed in custom-made military uniforms. Some were placed behind glass. Some were left out in the open. The soldiers watched the animals squealing in their pens, unaware that they were part of the same experiment. The only difference was that the pigs didn't have to salute. July 5th, 1957. The code name was Shot Hood. It was the biggest atmospheric test ever conducted over the continental United States. 74 kilotons, 5 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The countdown began. The loudspeakers crackled across the dry desert floor. Each minus 60 seconds, the laughter died out. Men clenched their rifles. Some began to pray. The silence of the desert became heavy, almost suffocating. H minus 10 seconds. Goggles on. Brace for impact. 0. First, there was no sound, only light. A light so intense it erased the world. It didn't matter if you were facing away. The ground reflected the flash like a mirror. The heat hit instantly. A wave of thermal radiation that felt like someone had opened a blast furnace inches from your neck. Then came the sound. A roar that tore the sky apart. The shockwave hit the trenches seconds later. It didn't just push you, it crushed you. It threw grown men across the dirt like rag dolls. Helmets flew off. The walls of the trenches began to collapse. In the distance, the pigs in uniforms didn't stand a chance. The heat melted the glass windows. The sand of the desert turned into green glass, known as trinitite. But the nightmare wasn't over. As the giant mushroom cloud, purple, black, and orange, rose into the stratosphere, the loudspeakers came alive again. The officers barked a command that defies all logic. Stand up! Move out! March towards the cloud. You have to remember, these boys were trained to follow orders, so they stood up. They brushed the dirt off their uniforms, and they marched. They walked directly into the radioactive fog. They maneuvered tanks over the glass-crusted sand. Veterans recall a strange metallic taste in their mouths, like sucking on a copper penny. That was the taste of cesium and strontium-90. They were breathing in millions of radioactive particles. Some of them marched within a mile of ground zero. They saw the twisted metal of the test structures. They saw the smoking remains of the animals. And they were told, "Good job, soldier. You proved that America can fight in a nuclear war." When the operation was over, there were no parades. There were no medals. Instead, there were men in black suits with paperwork. The soldiers were forced to sign strict non-disclosure agreements, an oath of silence. They were told that if they spoke about what they saw, they would be court-martialed. They would go to prison. They would be traitors. So they went home. They returned to their wives, their jobs, their normal lives. They buried the memory deep inside. But the radiation was already at work. It was a ticking time bomb in their DNA. Years passed. The 19-year-old boys became fathers and grandfathers, but something was wrong. Strange cancers began to appear. Leukemia, bone cancer, tumors in the lungs. Men in their 30s started losing their teeth. Their bones became so brittle they would break from a simple fall. But the horror didn't stop with them. It passed to their children. The wives of atomic veterans had miscarriages at rates far higher than the national average. Children were born with genetic defects. The radiation had rewritten their genetic code. The war in the desert was now being fought in hospital rooms and nurseries. When these dying men finally went to the government for help, they were met with a stone wall. The Veterans Administration denied their claims. They were told, "There is no proof you were exposed to dangerous levels of radiation." They were told, "The fire in the records department destroyed your files." They were told, "You are imagining it." For decades, they were gaslighted by the very flag they swore to protect. The government waited for them to die, hoping the secret would be buried with them. It wasn't until the 1990s, after the Cold War ended, that the files were declassified. The world finally learned the truth about the atomic veterans. But for thousands of them, the apology came too late. They fought two wars, one in the desert against an invisible enemy, and one at home against the silence. Today, the wind still blows across the Nevada test site. The craters are still there, and if you listen closely, you can almost hear the echo of the countdown. This was Operation Plumbbob, a reminder that in the game of superpowers, the pawns are always the first to fall. If this story chilled your bones, subscribe to the Nation Archives. We uncover what history tried to hide.